Hello and welcome to the big picture. The Indian business community is up in arms against the CBI action to file an FIR against the leading industrialist of India, Kumar Mangalam Birla, along with a former bureaucrat and coal secretary PC Parak. The concerted attack against the CBI by both the industry and business leaders as well as the bureaucracy has raised a major storm in the country. The Indian business leaders feel that such actions are not only a threat against them and their business activities, but also on the overall business environment in the country. Allegations are also flying thick and fast against the government too, with the Prime Minister also not being spared. Ironically, the government seemed to be equally upset with the actions of the CBI. Senior ministers are taking the side of the corporate leaders and warning of severe effect on investments, both foreign and domestic. Are the business leaders justified in feeling that they are under threat? Is there a larger problem of dissonance between the policies of the government and the way the institutions like the CAG, CBI and the judiciary approaches them? We will discuss all this today with TSR Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, Prabhir Purkayastha, Telecom and Power Sector Analyst, Rajan S. Mathews, Director General of the Cellular Operators Association of India, and Priya Ranjan, a Senior Business Journalist. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Subramanian, I'd like to come to you first. You know, this storm which seems to have been raised now in the last few days after this, very reputed industrialist has been, named in the FIR. You think that, there is a problem in the way this whole issue, the whole economic policy is approached by agencies like the CAG, the CBI and even the judiciary, and how the government thinks about it and how the government acts in these matters?
Girish, in my view, we should not make too much of this particular FIR. This is only one sliver.
Yes, absolutely.
In the overall Colgate
Yes, I don't want
and
you to address this
therefore, we
FIR.
should not draw too many conclusions.
Yes.
That's right. I don't also in broad terms, there are 3 or 4 issues arising out of this FIR.
Right.
One is that the industry feels aggrieved.
Yes.
Well, to some extent, they got a justification, but don't forget that our industry is not exactly a bunch of angels. It is not as if that probably industry feels that more profit is to be made in Delhi than in technology or in marketing or in organization of their factories through liaison in Delhi. And they also feel that, I believe that to be fair to them, if they are completely above board, probably none of them will survive in India, given the circumstances of business in India. And lastly, if we have the same kind of disclosure and transparency arrangement as you have in Europe and America, a lot of them probably will be behind bars. Having said that, we have to be careful before you throw the book at him through a CBI inquiry or a charge sheet. Inquiry, yes, preliminary inquiry, yes, but this is a RC. This is not a PE. Before you come to a RC, which is practically a criminal case, there has to be some substance there. I am not sure that it has shaken up the industrial world or anything to a large extent. Already things are quite bad. In any case, investment climate is down to basement. Till the next elections, we can't see. I can't see. Already the industry is down and out, so to speak, so it has not done any damage. But the larger picture is, you mentioned the role of CAG, etc. Like, you can't blame, for example, Sanjaya for Mahabharata war. The CAG merely reported what happened. He didn't invent the Colgate. The Colgate was perpetrated by the government. So therefore, the government sowed the few lakh crore wind. Now the whirlwind is being reaped. I think that's broadly it. Let us hope it will come to a reasonable conclusion before the elections are over. So whoever comes to power in April, May, June, we will now have a new face of the economy.
Okay, Mr. Rajan Mathews, the outrage which is being expressed by the business leaders, industrialists across board in the last few days, it seems to be and saying that if this kind of actions are taken, it's going to affect the business environment, investments are not going to come in, all these things. Somewhere the underlying message which the industry seems to be giving is that you have to treat us differently from the normal people who who get involved in these kind of things, the CBI needs to deal with us differently. Is that the message which the industry is trying to send across?
No, I don't think so. I think you put your finger on the operative word, which is ordinary. And I don't think we're talking about ordinary companies here. We're talking about sterling blue chip companies in the Indian market. Let me just give you context. In 1995, when I was at AT&T US, I basically was part of the team that looked at joint venture partners to enter into India. We looked at many companies, and as you know, AT&T has a sterling public record and position, and we were keen to make sure that the company we joint ventured with was equally up to mark. And I have to say that we fixed on the Aditya Birla Group because of their sterling reputation. I've had the privilege of working with Mr. Birla for the last 4 or 5 years between 96 and 99, and I must say he ran a very clean ship as far as AT&T was concerned in the joint venture we operated, which today is Idea. So the operative word again is ordinary versus look at these sterling companies. So before you go against these companies, I think a due diligence of a higher order must be done before you go against the top echelons of the company.
Mr. Mathews, according to the CBI, they have been on this job for the last 6 months. After 6 months of what you say as due diligence, they have taken this action. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that the CBI's reputation is also at stake. So the criticism against CBI, anyway, they will have to justify what they are doing. But the fact is that the industry, by raising such an outrage, don't you think that they are trying to pose themselves as different from others?
No, I don't think we are asking to be treated differently. I think it's a proportionality perspective. If there are divisions and if there are entities and if there are people in a company that are looked at suspiciously or as a result of investigation and due diligence thought to be miscreants or those who have broken the law, I think yes, it's appropriate to identify them and let the course of justice take its course. I don't think we would disagree with that. But again, to go to the top person in a company who by very definition is not involved in the nitty-gritty details. So I don't know the particular details that the CBI is alleging in this particular instance. But again, please go back to the instance of track records. The Aditya Birla Group and companies of this stature are not known to be involved in this type of activity. They are public companies, they have many stockholders, and their reputation is their biggest asset. So they would be very careful. So that's the distinction that we're trying to make in this particular instance.
Okay. Prabhir, are the business leaders justified in the way, what we have seen in the past? Mr. Mathews thinks that due diligence needs to be done. The reputation of the company needs to be taken into account. You can't just do these things in such a cavalier manner.
I find that a very strange argument that against certain companies we need to take different we need to set different standards for the investigative authorities than against certain other run-of-the-mill companies. I think the issue is in the coal allocation, certain private sector companies in collusion with political leaders, and they have been identified, and with the, shall I say, the silent approval of the Prime Minister, the government bureaucrats involved have given a largesse, which the CAG has pointed out. It's 44 billion metric tons of coal we are talking about, 6 times the world's production. Okay. Now the companies involved is Jindal's, Aditya Birla Group, their Reliance, Tata's, you have them. Okay. Now these are the sterling companies, if you will, by the standards Mr. Mathews talks about. So the question is, they are also the ones who cornered the benefits. Are we to believe it happened completely innocently, or are we to believe what today everybody seems to believe, that there's collusion between the business houses, the bureaucracy and the political leadership, and sections of them are complicit in the public loot that has taken place, particularly post-91, when a lot of privatization of natural resources have taken place, and 2 of the key ones being, in fact, I'll say 3. One is the spectrum, which we know about.
Telecom.
Colgate, which we are talking about, and also the hydrocarbon sector,
Right.
where there's been a huge issue also. So this is where we have a predatory, we seem to have a predatory capitalist, big capital bureaucracy political nexus, which has really been involved with privatizing natural resources almost at throwaway prices. This is something that needs to be
Yes,
examined.
Prabhir, the fact of the matter is that you may ideologically differ about these kind of policies which have been, but the fact is that the governments, successive governments since 91 have been following these kind of policies. But do you think that the question which I asked Mr. Subramanian also, these policies and whatever has come out of it and the kind of exposure which it has resulted in, you think that there is some kind of a dissonance in understanding these policies, and do you think because of that the CAG comes out with this notional loss theory, these fantastic amounts which they come out with?
Girish, the issue is very simple. The post 91 was supposed to be about market liberalization, but here you have allocation at really of natural resources without resorting to the market. So all those who are in favor of the market, we have the finance minister, we have the prime minister, we have Mr. Montague Singh Ahluwalia, all of them have been on one hand suggesting everything should be done by the market, subsidies should be taken out, but yet on the other hand are willing to give natural resources, in other words subsidies, to big capital. Now that is a contradiction, which is what CAG is pointing out, the Supreme Court is pointing out, is against the rules of the, is against
So
law of this country.
you don't think that neither the CAG nor the CBI or the judiciary doesn't understand. The argument is that they don't understand these things, and that's why we
I
find
think this is a completely bogus argument. If you believe in the market, auction them. And I don't think there is anything which is intrinsically wrong with an auction if you believe in the market. I don't agree with it, and here my ideology could come into question, but assuming, for argument's sake, market is what should determine the price of goods, as is argued by the current dominant orthodoxy, then auction them. Then why talk about discretionary allocation of 44 billion metric tons of coal and also spectrum, the way it has been done? And I think that is where the nexus between the bureaucracy, the political leadership and the business houses come in. Now, the real issue is, I think, that the CBI is seen to be partisan,
Yes.
that it does not touch certain sections, it only touches the softer sections, and that is the one which really needs what was originally argued, ombudsman, which needs distance of the CBI, the investigative agencies. Unless we do that, it's not going to carry conviction that the only people ultimately hauled up are the businessmen, the bureaucrat, ex-bureaucrat, and the powerful political leaders who are involved are really getting away and appear scot-free. That is the problem that we seem to have.
Priya, Ranjan, do you agree with Prabhir that the actual problem is the partisanship, and that is what the business class or the business leaders are talking about? Or you think that they have a point when they say that though Mr. Mathews says that we are not asking to be treated differently, but the arguments imply that they need to be treated with kid gloves?
Girish, I think we have a more fundamental issue here. The fundamental issue is whether criminality should be attributed to what is legitimate.
Right.
Now, is making profit or the so-called private gains, is it criminal? That's, to my mind, is the fundamental issue.
You think that is the issue in this case?
I'm afraid a
You think
dysfunctional government.
You think that is the issue in all the
Absolutely,
cases, whether it's
Girish.
2G or
Absolutely, Girish.
or coal or whatever it is?
I'm absolutely convinced that a dysfunctional government, an irresponsible opposition, and state organs, certain state organs, and even constitutional authorities, taking an anarchist approach to rule of law, have created this kind of a situation where profit, where is it in our constitution or the law of the land that profit is a criminal act?
No.
Now, what
Who
do you
is saying
expect?
that?
No.
Who is saying that
Just
according
look
to you
at
that
this.
profit is a criminal?
Let's just look at the FIR which has been lodged. Now, what is the FIR saying? what is the allegation?
The
Allegation
FIR, in
is a
fact, so
criminal
far has not
conspiracy.
made an issue of corruption.
No. FIR is the allegation is criminal conspiracy
Yes,
against Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla.
right.
Now, what is the criminal conspiracy? That he is supposed to have written letters, he is supposed to have met Mr. Parakh, and a decision had been overturned for private gains at the cost of public sector undertakings or otherwise at the cost of exchequer.
Right.
That seems to be.
Right.
Now, the question is, what do you expect Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla to do? If he is putting up an aluminium factory and if he needs power, for that the public policy allows him to apply for a captive coal mine, you don't expect him to apply for it. You don't expect him to make presentation. You don't expect him to meet the coal secretary. You don't expect him to meet the prime minister. Means, if you have a public policy, if you have a procedure, and Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla or any industrialist for that matter is following the process and is striving for his corporation to make profit. Now, what is the criminality involved?
What is
in
the
this?
criminality involved?
That is the question
Yes.
that we have to.
Would you like to respond immediately,
I think
Prabhir?
there's a very small point of difference I would have with you, that actually even from public records, it appears that Hindalco had already been given certain captive mines which they did not actually mine.
They had not.
And they had not fully mined, and without doing that, they again asked for the same set of projects. They again passed for allocation. But let's not get into
the specifics because there's still investigations are on.
I think the real issue is
that corruption. I am looking at the larger issue.
The larger
It is not
point.
the larger point
this is
is
just
that
an
whether it's
illustrative
coal,
case.
2G.
This is
I
just
think
an-
Girish, one
the
important
larger
One
point,
second, let him
Girish.
finish.
important point is there a mala fide in the decision?
Exactly.
That's a key issue.
Absolutely.
And if that is shown, that there is largesse has been given against certain things which have been done as an act of returning a favor, then yes, it's a case of corruption. Otherwise, I would say the state coal secretary can still defend it, saying that's a wrong decision. It's not mala fide.
Absolutely. Mr. Subramanian, my question is that, there is also this feeling among a section, whether it's the corporate industry, a section of the media also, that, an organization like CBI is not really equipped to deal with the economic offenses of the kind because, they don't understand the new policies. They don't understand, as Priya Ranjan says, that, a profit motive is of a businessman is a very valid thing. So you think that there is some problem with the way that CBI approaches these kind of issues?
Yes, Girish, I think we are now mixing a large number of issues and trying to sort of get our results in a cross-sectoral kind of a manner from different areas. Now, as we said, I think we should segregate this particular case. This particular case, looking at the FIR, no case is made out. The elements of a conspiracy are not made out. There could have been a conspiracy.
No, Mr.
There could not have
Subramanian.
been, but based on the FIR,
No,
after
Mr.
6 months of investigation, it is not there.
No,
So
Mr.
I'm going to leave
Subramanian,
this aside
let
now.
us not-
I go
let-
back to the
no, no,
other
Mr.
broader issue that you
Mr.
had raised just
Subramanian,
now.
1 minute. Let us not.
No,
On the
let us
CBI,
yes,
not
the
judge
CBI
anything on this
is-
issue as far as this issue is concerned. I'm trying to look at the larger
I'm not
picture
judging.
because
I agree,
there
I
has
agree.
been for
CBI
years together now, so last
CBI
2-3
in-
years. Yes.
CBI is certainly not the best of agencies to look at white-collar crime or cyber crime and this kind of a thing. They are still oriented towards the Thana crime or rural area crime, etc., or the urban social crime, etc. To a large extent, they still don't have the kind of expertise. But having said that, the larger issue that you have raised, I think the issues have emerged here. Well, we thought Dabol was a very great blue chip company.
Right.
We thought that Rajat Gupta was a great blue chip person. We have had many blue chip people in America and Europe who have fallen by the wayside.
Yes.
I don't think we should anymore trot out this blue chip argument, and blue chip can bite the dust. We thought that the Bhopal tragedy company, it is a huge, one of the largest companies in the world, is blue chip. So we don't
Satyam.
want to see any red chip, blue chip. I think that is to some extent completely
Satyam.
irrelevant kind of an argument. Having said Having said that, what has happened in India is, don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the CBI, don't shoot the CAG, they have only done their job. There has been heavy crony capitalism. Don't forget that in the case of Spectrum, the profitability started coming only around 2000. The badmashi started only around 2006. In the case of coal, the profitability started only around 2004, which is why at that time Parak had asked for auctions, because suddenly it became like land became profitable in Noida in 92, 93, it became profitable, and therefore everybody started coming in. And the government waited for 8 years and went to cronies, they didn't follow, that is sub judice now. So I think the issue really is not auction. Did we have a clear procedure? Will all the various screening committees procedure not indicate some kind of a crony attachment to various people, etc.? Leave aside the point that this is a very weak FIR.
Okay.
Leave this aside.
Okay, Mr.
Overall,
Mathews.
if somebody says there is no major scam in coal or in 2G, I'll be very, very surprised.
Okay, Mr. Mathew, this is the key, what Mr. Subramanian says and what Prabhir also was talking about. The fact of the matter is that in allocations, when it comes to allocations of natural resources, whether it is spectrum or coal or natural gas, hydrocarbons, isn't it also not the responsibility of the industry, of the corporates, to ensure that there is a level playing field, to ensure that there is transparency? The problem is that the industry and the industry is very happy when it is when some of them are favored by a government which is in power, and then you raise these kind of issues when they get into trouble. Don't you see that there is a certain amount of responsibility on the part of the corporates and the industry also to ensure right procedures are adopted?
I absolutely agree that there are right procedures, and I think the discussion needs to stay away from terms that muddy the water, like crony capitalism and all of that. I think that takes away from the crux of what we're discussing. Let me just stay with the 2G issue. First of all, please, let's make a distinction between
2G,
policy
coal,
and the implementation of policy. They will always...
Yes.
Yeah, there will always be those bad apples, both on the corporate side as well as in government, as well as in the bureaucracy, that will twist and turn the applicable rules and regulations for their particular advantage, which will be contrary to the law. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you look at the 2G, for example, there was a policy that had been followed all along. And may I just add that even till today, if you look at the profitability of the companies, there are huge losses. Most of them are in the red. There's huge debt. The only instances that you have is this asset
is responsible
transfer,
for it?
which is quite distinct. So let's
Not
muddy the water there.
Mr. Mathews, who is responsible?
Coming to the 2G situation.
Mr. Mathews,
yes?
1 second. Who is responsible for those
Who
losses?
is responsible?
Is it the government policy which is
Who is
responsible for that?
responsible for the losses? Please, let me please explain
Yes.
that when we talk about the huge losses, the national telecom policy was affordability. We implemented affordability at the expense of our profitability. Please bear in mind, please look at the index of what has gone on. In spite of the CPI index, which is the inflation factor going up by double digits, prices to the Aam Aadmi has come down tremendously over the last 10 years. So again, please look at those facts. And when you get back to this whole 2G issue, the issue that we support was transparency. We agree that transparency is essential. That's why we support auction and auction processes. The first come, first served, the Supreme Court said that, listen, look, there's an inherent flaw in this, fine, fix it. But please keep in mind that we are talking about a public good. The measure of profitability on a public good is just not what is discovered
But
in
we
an
have
auction.
also-
It has
okay.
to do with the larger good to the general public, and that has to be factored in.
Okay, but we have also seen in the 2G issue how the business rivalries play out, how it affects the policy making also. Prabhir?
The basic issue is that if you give natural resources virtually free, then what you get is a private auction instead of a public auction. This is exactly what happens in 2G. This is also what happens in coal scam, that you get these mines through your contacts, through your political connections, whatever. And after that, you sell them to others. And that is the huge private windfall profit you make. This is, as I said, the 2G Colgate in that are exactly identical.
Yes.
So crony capitalism has sense when you look at this part of it, because this is exactly what crony capitalism is all about.
It's all about.
It's about bureaucratic capital. You get resources at low price.
Mr.
through
Mathews
your
doesn't like
contacts in the state.
Mr. Mathews doesn't like the word.
He likes the word or not, it doesn't matter. That's what it is called all over the world, including the United States. So that's not different from what it's called here.
Okay, yes, Mr.
It is
Subramanian.
called crony capitalism in other parts of the world.
It's
Yes,
very
yes.
much a part of American
Mr.
lexicon we are borrowing, as
Mr.
including your
Subramanian.
ideology.
Yes, I was also going to agree with the last speaker that both in the 2G and the Colgate are extremely close parallels.
Right.
Because in both cases it was private profit. The distribution led to change of shares at astronomical prices. That only a minuscule part came here. In the case of coal, it was even worse because while the coal's value appreciated, we imported coal at 5 times the price. The public did not get the benefit. The exchequer did not get the higher price. It was only some private individuals whose values appreciated. So if anybody now calls these as sensible, sane, public interest policies, I would be very worried, very surprised. And on 2G, this is precisely the point argued in the Supreme Court.
Right.
That if the benefit had actually flown to the public, nobody will complain.
Absolutely.
Actually, it went away outside India
Right.
when the shares were sold outside. That's the crux of it. So lastly, we need either the state has to get a fair price or benefits should go to the public. It should not go to intermediaries.
Okay. Very quickly, last words to you, Priya Ranjan. Opaque government policies, opaqueness, lack of transparency. Is this what has created all these things?
I think the problem is with taking
apart from your theory that profit and of
No,
profit.
what I'm saying is the basic problem is taking a broad brush and painting it all black. See, the thing is that when the CAG comes out with a report, talks about revenue loss of
Quickly, we are running out of
thousands
time.
of crores,
Yes.
Either in case of coal or 2G or whatever. Now that is not a scam, not necessarily a scam. The key word is what is malafide.
So
You have a public policy. Now, within that
Could have a
policy,
malafide policy. That's the problem.
you can have
Whether
a
it is
malafide
malafide-
policy. You can have a malafide policy, but do you have a policy?
No policy is
And-
welfare policy.
Sorry? Okay. Mr. Mathews, last words to you. You think that this kind of a atmosphere which prevails, both the government as well as the industry needs to be a little more patient while dealing with these things instead of crying wolf and saying that the country is going to be affected, economy is going to be affected. Don't you think that there needs to be a balance on that?
There certainly needs to be a balance, but the question is where does that balance lie? And I think we have to be very careful in terms of the climate that we create. In a time period when we are looking for foreign investment, the type of perception that we give to the folks who are looking to invest in India has to be taken into consideration. And if we go after the companies that have had a good track record and are known for probity and for clean interfaces, right, with the government and others, when we take them down, then we seriously have to ask what is the overall impact on the economy.
Okay, Mr. Subramanian, very quickly, last words.
In the medium and long term, we need to clean up our act. We need to create proper conditions. We need to create predictability, not run around immediate investment. Our job is not to please people all over the world. Our job is to create. India has got enormous room for investment. Investments will come pouring in if we clean up the act and make it a clean system here.
Okay.
And that is the job, and not to ask for immediately pleasing people in various places.
Okay, I think on that note we need to end. I think Subramanian has put it very succinctly what needs to be done. The fact of the matter is that that this whole controversy has shows that we in this country needs to be more patient when dealing with investigating agencies and give them a chance to prove that what they have said instead of piling on them. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Rajan Mathews, TSR Subramanian, Prabhir Purkayastha and Priya Ranjan Dash. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, Big Picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.